Ma'am, I can't find my daddy, the little girl said, her voice trembling in the cold mountain air. Sierra Langford tightened her grip on the steering wheel as snow thickened in slow spirals across the winding forest road. Twilight had begun to settle over the mountains, turning the world into a soft blur of white and gray. The dark silhouettes of pine trees lined both sides of the narrow path, their branches heavy with fresh powder that bent them low toward the ground. It was eerily quiet, no passing cars, no bird song. Just the occasional groan of wind pressing against the glass and the muffled crunch of tires over packed snow. Inside the SUV, the heat hummed on low. Sierra preferred it that way. The cold kept her sharp, kept her focused. Dressed in a cream wool coat with a faux fur scarf wrapped snugly around her neck and leather boots polished despite the terrain, she looked every bit the polished executive she was. Her blonde hair, still softly curled from a salon visit days earlier, rested against her shoulders as she leaned back into the leather seat. Everything about her appearance spoke of control, of a woman who had her life perfectly organized. She had come to these mountains to escape. After a brutal year of boardroom battles that left her exhausted and a messy breakup that left her questioning everything she thought she knew about relationships, she had finally hit pause on her relentless life. She booked this remote cabin 2 weeks ago, left her phone on airplane mode, and told her assistant not to call unless the company was literally burning down. All she wanted was silence, solitude, and space to breathe, without the constant pressure of expectations and responsibilities weighing on her shoulders. The grocery bag on the passenger seat rustled as she turned another bend in the road. She was almost back to the cabin now. Just another mile or so through these winding mountain paths. Soon she would be curled up by the crackling fire with a glass of wine in hand, watching the snow fall peacefully from the comfort of her rented sanctuary. She had been looking forward to this moment all day. That was when it happened. A flash of red darted across the road directly in front of her vehicle. Sierra slammed the brakes with both feet. The car skidded violently, tires sliding dangerously over the icy surface beneath the fresh snow. White powder flew up like a curtain, completely obscuring her view through the windshield. Her heart hammered against her ribs as the vehicle jolted to a sudden, jarring stop that threw her forward against the seatbelt. She sat frozen for a moment, hands trembling on the wheel, her breath coming in short gasps. Just beyond the hood of her SUV, standing in the middle of the road as if she had materialized from the storm itself, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, bundled in a tattered knit sweater far too thin for this weather. A red dress peeked out beneath it, the fabric damp and clinging to her small frame. Her boots were mismatched, one brown, one black. Her light brown hair clung damply to her pale cheeks, and her wide eyes shimmered with shock and fear as she stared at the vehicle that had nearly struck her. Sierra threw open the door and rushed out into the snow, her heart still racing. "Sweetheart," she called, crouching down carefully in the snow. "Are you hurt? What are you doing out here all alone?" The girl didn't answer at first. Her lips quivered uncontrollably, her small chin tucked into her scarf, as she blinked hard against the tears forming in her eyes. Her whole body was shaking. Whether from cold or fear, Sierra couldn't tell. Then she burst into sobs, her small shoulders heaving. "Ma'am," she hiccuped through her crying, "I can't find my daddy. He said he'd be back before dark, but he didn't come. I waited and waited." The words struck Sierra like a physical punch to the chest. Not just the raw fear in the child's voice, or the cold that had clearly settled deep into her small frame, but that word, Daddy. Something about the way she said it, with such desperate hope and trust, cracked through the protective ice Sierra had carefully built around her own heart over the past year. She reached out slowly, gently taking the girl's frozen hands into her gloved ones. The child's fingers were like ice, barely able to move. "Okay," she said softly, keeping her voice calm and reassuring. "Let's get you warm first. All right? Then we'll figure this out together." The girl nodded weakly, still sniffling. Sierra guided her carefully into the front seat of the SUV, turned the heat up to full blast, and grabbed a thick blanket from the back. She wrapped it around the girl's shoulders, then sat beside her for several minutes, rubbing her arms gently and watching her calm little by little as warmth began to seep back into her body. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Maisie," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible. "Maisie Clark." "That's a beautiful name, Maisie." "I'm Sierra." The girl clutched the blanket tighter around herself. "We live nearby, in a wood house, just a little bit away from here. I know how to get there. I can show you." Sierra hesitated for only a breath, weighing her options. Then she reached for her keys, turned the engine back on, and gave Maisie a reassuring smile that she hoped looked more confident than she felt. "Okay then, Maisie. You tell me which way to go, and we'll find your house." The car rolled forward slowly, tires crunching deliberately through fresh snow, guided by the soft, a hesitant voice of a little girl in a red dress, towards something Sierra did not yet understand, but felt compelled to follow. The road narrowed considerably as they drove deeper into the woods, tall trees arching overhead like silent witnesses to their journey. Maisie sat bundled in the blanket, her small face pressed close to the window as her breath fogged the glass. She pointed with one tiny finger. "Down there," she said quietly. "That's our house. See the porch?" Sierra slowed the SUV carefully, turning onto a faint path that was barely visible beneath the blanket of fresh snow. Her tires crunched softly as they approached a small wooden cabin nestled among the towering pines. It looked like something lifted straight out of a storybook, modest and old, but sturdy and well-maintained. The chimney stood silent against the darkening sky. The porch light was off, leaving the front of the house in shadow. She parked and glanced around cautiously. No other homes in sight anywhere. No lights in the distance. Just endless trees, pristine snow, and the low hum of her idling engine breaking the silence. Maisie hopped out before Sierra could stop her, running through the snow to the front door with surprising energy. She pushed it open without using a key. "Daddy never locks it," she explained, looking back at Sierra. "In case I need to come in when he's not here." Sierra followed slowly, her boots creaking on the wooden floor as she stepped inside. The cabin was dim and quiet. The fireplace sat cold and empty, and the only light came from a single oil lamp on a side table, its flame flickering gently. "Hello?" Sierra called out, her voice echoing slightly in the small space. No answer came back. Her eyes scanned the room carefully, taking in every detail. It was small, but remarkably tidy, everything in its proper place. A well-loved couch with faded cushions, a threadbare rug that had clearly seen years of use, children's books stacked neatly in a corner shelf, a pair of tiny shoes placed carefully by the door, a folded blanket draped over a wooden rocking chair. Despite its modest appearance, the space radiated care and love. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Whoever lived here clearly cared deeply for both the space and for Maisie. "Where's your dad, sweetheart?" Maisie climbed onto the couch, still wrapped tightly in her blanket. "He went to get firewood. He always goes into the woods behind the house. He said he'd be back before dark, but then it got dark, and he still wasn't back." Sierra looked at the window. The sky outside had turned a deep purple black. It was already well past dark. She pulled out her phone, hoping against hope. No signal. Of course not. They were too deep in the mountains. Maisie hugged her knees to her chest. "Sometimes he takes a long time," she said, though her voice trembled with uncertainty. "But not this long. Never this long." Sierra knelt beside her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "All right, let's warm up and wait a bit. Okay? I'm sure he'll be back soon." In the small kitchen, Sierra found some canned soup and dried noodles in the cupboard. She managed to heat something simple on the old stove, spooning it carefully into two mismatched bowls she found in the cabinet. "Here," she said, handing one to Maisie with a spoon. It's not fancy, but it'll help warm you up from the inside. Maisie ate slowly, her small spoon tapping against the bowl with each bite. In between mouthfuls, she spoke softly, almost dreamily, as if sharing secrets. My mom died when I was little, she said matter-of-factly. I don't remember her voice anymore. Just her hair. It was long and soft and smelled like apples. Sierra felt her throat tighten. That's a nice memory to have. My. Daddy says she was the brave one. That's why I have to be brave too. Like her. Sierra swallowed hard, fighting back unexpected tears. This little girl, so impossibly small, carried more emotional weight than most adults Sierra knew. Her words held no self-pity or complaint, only quiet, mature acceptance of a reality no child should have to face. He says I should never go out after dark, that the woods are tricky and dangerous, but I waited and waited, and he didn't come back. Sierra gently brushed her hand over the girl's hair, smoothing it down. Something fundamental shifted in her chest. Stranger or not, she couldn't just walk away from this situation now. Outside, the wind picked up noticeably. Snow slapped hard against the windows and crept through tiny cracks in the wooden frame. The old cabin groaned and creaked in the cold like a living thing. Sierra checked her watch under the lamplight. 7:12 in the evening. He had been gone far too long for a simple firewood run. She stood and paced to the window, peering out into the darkness. Nothing but white and black. No movement. No signs of life. No approaching figure. She turned back to Maisie with determination in her eyes. Do you know where your dad usually goes to get wood? Can you show me the direction? Maisie nodded seriously. I can show you. I know the way. Gracklands, know the way. Sierra hesitated, every rational instinct screaming at her to stay inside where it was safe and warm. But something stronger and deeper pushed her forward, something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Purpose. Connection. The desperate need to help. All right, she said firmly, grabbing her coat from the chair. Let's go find him. She bundled Maisie even tighter in the blanket, lifted her securely into her arms, and switched on the flashlight on her phone, grateful it still had battery, even without signal. The girl wrapped her small arms trustingly around Sierra's neck. Ready? Sierra asked, looking into those wide, trusting eyes. Maisie whispered into her ear, her breath warm against Sierra's cold skin. I'm not scared when you're here. Sierra felt something break and rebuild inside her simultaneously. She opened the door with renewed determination. Bitter, cold air hit her face instantly, sharp and unforgiving. Massive trees loomed in every direction, heavy with snow that seemed to absorb all sound and light. She stepped forward into the dark, into the vast unknown, not for business, not for herself, not for any strategic reason, but for a little girl in a red dress who needed her. And somehow, in that moment, stepping out into the freezing wilderness felt more right than anything Sierra had done in years.